North Korea represents one of the most complex and enigmatic contemporary geopolitical systems, where an apparently isolated nation manages to keep the world in a permanent state of strategic alert. Beyond traditional narratives of isolation, an intricately constructed military system emerges that challenges conventional understandings of defensive capacity and power projection. This study delves into the deep layers of this system, revealing how limitations are transformed into strategic advantages, where each missile and demonstration of force represents much more than war instruments. They are chapters of a complex narrative of national resistance. The Korean People's Army emerged from the crucible of post-World War II geopolitical tensions, a military force fundamentally shaped by Soviet doctrine and Cold War ideological fractures. Established on February 8, 1948, under Kim Il-sung's leadership, this military apparatus would become one of the most isolated yet meticulously organized defensive structures in modern global history. Nestled within the mountainous terrain of the Korean Peninsula, North Korea's military development represented a unique fusion of revolutionary zeal, Soviet military engineering principles, and an almost hermetic national philosophy of self-reliance and militant preparedness. The Soviet Union's profound influence on North Korea's military infrastructure cannot be overstated. Soviet military advisors, veterans of the Great Patriotic War, systematically redesigned and modernized the nascent Korean armed forces, transferring sophisticated Cold War-era tactical knowledge, weapon systems, and organizational frameworks. By the mid-1950s, North Korean military academies were virtually carbon copies of Soviet military educational institutions, with training manuals, strategic doctrines, and equipment procurement strategies directly imported from Moscow. This comprehensive knowledge transfer created a military culture obsessively focused on disciplined mass mobilization, complex defensive strategies, and an almost religious commitment to technological self-improvement within severe geopolitical constraints. As the decades progressed, North Korea's military evolved from a Soviet-model defensive force into a uniquely adapted defensive ecosystem, characterized by extraordinary redundancy and a multi-layered defensive posture. With 1.2 million active personnel and approximately 110,000 Air Force members operating 940 predominantly legacy aircraft, the Korean People's Army developed an intricate system of underground facilities, dispersed military installations, and a robust electronic warfare capability that would become legendary in international military intelligence circles. The regime's strategic philosophy transformed military preparedness into a national identity, where every technological limitation became an opportunity for innovative resistance, setting the stage for a military apparatus that would continually surprise and perplex global military analysts. The question lingering in the shadows: what unexpected capabilities might emerge from this hermetically sealed military domain? North Korea's defensive architecture represents a complex technological labyrinth built on predominantly Soviet and Russian air defense systems designed to create an extremely challenging area denial zone, strategically concentrated along the demilitarized zone and at critical national infrastructure points. These systems compose an integrated defense mesh that combines long-range radars, surface-to-air missile batteries, and a highly redundant military communication network. Platforms like the S-200 and S-300 systems, inherited from the Soviet era, form the backbone of this defensive architecture, complemented by more modern Chinese and Russian-manufactured systems, creating interception layers that can detect, track, and potentially neutralize enemy aircraft across multiple engagement envelopes. North Korean radar systems represent a critical element of this defense-in-depth strategy, utilizing a combination of legacy detection technologies and local adaptations that compensate for technological limitations through deployment density and tactical dispersion. Radars like the P-18 Spoon Rest and some modernized VHF surveillance systems demonstrate a surprising ability to detect stealth aircraft, exploiting low radar signature system vulnerabilities through multiple frequency scanning techniques. This detection saturation approach is complemented by a dense network of underground and mobile military communication stations that can rapidly reconfigure communication routes and command points in case of attack. ensuring operational resilience that challenges traditional electronic warfare and air defense suppression principles. North Korean defensive sophistication transcends mere technological aggregation, revealing an asymmetric warfare philosophy where limitations are transformed into strategic advantages. Each defense system is designed not just to intercept, but to create zones of tactical uncertainty and unpredictability, where deployment density and rapid reconfiguration capability replace the need for cutting-edge equipment. Mobile anti-aircraft missile batteries can be quickly relocated, communications can be instantly fragmented and redistributed, and critical infrastructures can be protected by defense layers that go far beyond traditional defensive perimeter concepts. This approach transforms every kilometer of North Korean territory into a potential technological minefield where the attacker's predictability is constantly challenged and where geography becomes the most powerful ally of a defense system built with ingenuity, determination, and a profound understanding of conventional military system vulnerabilities. The lingering question: how far can this defensive fortress resist a technologically superior attack? North Korea's technological capabilities represent a paradoxical ecosystem of strategic innovation and systemic limitation, particularly evident in its ballistic missile program and electronic warfare infrastructure. Developed under extreme international sanctions and technological isolation, the regime has cultivated a unique approach to military technology that prioritizes indigenous development and asymmetric strategic capabilities. Ballistic missile systems like the Hwaseong series demonstrate a remarkable progression from basic Soviet-era designs to increasingly sophisticated intermediate range and potential intercontinental platforms. These missile technologies, while technologically constrained, showcase a persistent engineering approach that transforms limited resources into strategically significant weapon systems. The regime's missile portfolio spans short-range tactical missiles, medium-range ballistic missiles capable of regional strike capabilities, and experimental platforms that signal ambitions of broader strategic reach, all developed through a combination of reverse engineering, limited international technology acquisition, and indigenous research. The electronic warfare domain represents perhaps the most sophisticated aspect of North Korean military technological development. Despite limited resources, the regime has constructed an intricate electronic countermeasures ecosystem that prioritizes disruption, signal manipulation, and defensive technological adaptation. Advanced jamming capabilities, developed through a combination of Soviet-era knowledge transfer and localized innovation, allow North Korean military systems to create complex electromagnetic interference zones that can potentially neutralize sophisticated communication and navigation systems. These capabilities extend beyond traditional defensive paradigms, incorporating cyber-electromagnetic activities that can target communication infrastructure, navigation systems, and potentially disrupt advanced military networks. Specialized units within the Korean People's Army have developed techniques for signal interception, communication network disruption, and strategic information warfare that leverage asymmetric technological approaches, transforming apparent technological limitations into strategic advantages through innovative implementation and unconventional tactical thinking. North Korea's technological capabilities ultimately reflect a strategic philosophy of maximizing limited resources through innovative engineering and adaptive strategic thinking. The regime's technological development occurs within a unique constraint ecosystem that demands creative solutions and alternative technological pathways. Missile and electronic warfare technologies are not merely developed as standalone systems but are integrated into a comprehensive defensive strategy that emphasizes redundancy, dispersal, and unexpected technological adaptation. This approach transforms technological limitations into a form of strategic ambiguity, where potential adversaries cannot easily predict or neutralize the regime's military technological potential. Underground research facilities, dispersed technological development centers, and a national ideology that prioritizes military technological self-sufficiency create a unique innovation environment. The continuous evolution of North Korean military technology represents more than a simple weapons development program. It embodies a complex geopolitical strategy of technological resistance and strategic unpredictability. The fundamental question emerging from this technological landscape remains: how can a technologically constrained regime develop such sophisticated and potentially disruptive military capabilities within an environment of extreme international isolation? North Korea's geopolitical landscape emerges as a complex chessboard of strategic survival, meticulously navigated through intricate relationships with China and Russia, and defined by a perpetual state of international sanctions that have paradoxically shaped its military and technological development. The regime's survival strategy hinges on a delicate balance of diplomatic maneuvering, strategic alliances, and a unique form of technological resistance that transforms international isolation into a defensive mechanism. China and Russia represent more than mere diplomatic partners. They are critical lifelines that provide technological transfer, economic support, and strategic buffer zones against Western geopolitical pressure. These relationships are characterized by pragmatic interdependence, where North Korea serves as a strategic buffer state and occasional diplomatic proxy, while receiving critical technological, economic, and military support that enables its continued resistance against international containment strategies. The international sanctions regime has created a unique technological ecosystem that has forced North Korea to develop unprecedented levels of military and industrial self-sufficiency. Rather than completely debilitating the regime, sanctions have paradoxically stimulated a hyper-adaptive approach to technological development, military procurement, and economic survival. The country has developed sophisticated networks for circumventing international economic restrictions, utilizing cryptocurrency, shadow banking systems, and complex international trading mechanisms to acquire critical technologies and resources. Military technological development has become a national priority, with resources redirected from civilian sectors to maintain a robust defense infrastructure. This approach has resulted in a military-first philosophy where technological innovation becomes a matter of national survival, creating an environment of intense technological creativity born from extreme constraint. The regime's ability to maintain and potentially advance its military capabilities despite comprehensive international isolation represents a unique case study in resilience and strategic adaptation. The geopolitical isolation of North Korea creates a complex strategic calculus that extends far beyond traditional diplomatic paradigms. The regime's survival strategy is fundamentally built on creating strategic uncertainty, maintaining a perpetual state of potential conflict, and leveraging its geographic and technological positioning as a form of deterrence. Nuclear and missile programs are not merely military capabilities, but serve as critical diplomatic instruments, creating negotiation leverage and international strategic relevance. The relationships with China and Russia are characterized by strategic ambiguity, where support is provided without complete commitment, allowing North Korea to maintain a degree of diplomatic and military autonomy. This approach transforms apparent weakness into a form of strategic strength, where the regime's unpredictability becomes its primary geopolitical asset. The international community finds itself constantly recalibrating its approach, unable to fully predict or effectively contain a state that has transformed isolation into a sophisticated survival mechanism. The fundamental question that emerges from this complex geopolitical landscape remains: how can a seemingly constrained regime maintain such strategic relevance and potential military capability within a global system designed to limit its power and influence? North Korea's displays of force represent an elaborate geopolitical theater where military parades, missile tests, and public exhibitions of military might serve as complex strategic communication instruments, transcending mere physical displays of armament capabilities. Parades in Pyongyang, particularly during events like Foundation Day, transform into genuine geopolitical engineering performances, where each unit, each piece of equipment, and each choreographed movement communicates precise messages to internal and international audiences. These demonstrations are not simply military force exhibitions, but intricately constructed visual narratives that reaffirm the regime's ideology, legitimize leadership, and project an image of national unity and uncontestable military power. The millimeter precision of the parades, the almost robotic uniformity of soldiers, and the calculated exposure of weapon systems represent a complex visual language of intimidation and resistance. North Korean missile tests emerge as another critical instrument of force demonstration, carefully orchestrated to provoke specific geopolitical reactions and test the diplomatic limits of the international community. Each launch represents not just a technological test, but a calculated strategic statement designed to demonstrate missile development capabilities, test defense systems, and signal willingness for military escalation. The technical progression of these tests, from short-range missiles to potentially intercontinental platforms, reveals a strategy of incremental development that maximizes geopolitical impact and symbolic value. The precise selection of moments, trajectories, and types of tested missiles functions as a sophisticated non-verbal communication, where each launch carries encoded messages about military capabilities, political determination, and regional strategic positioning. North Korean military supremacy propaganda transcends traditional strategic communication boundaries, transforming into a complex system of national narrative that integrates military demonstrations, ideological control, and international power projection. State media, military documentaries, and training narratives are meticulously constructed to create a mythology of military invincibility, where each soldier is represented not just as a combatant, but as a living symbol of national resilience. These narratives are designed for both internal and external consumption, creating a perception of military strength that transcends actual technical capabilities. North Korean leaders, especially Kim Jong-un, are consistently portrayed as supreme military strategists, personally participating in demonstrations and inspections that reinforce the iconography of heroic military leadership. This approach transforms force demonstrations into complex psychological instruments, where the perception of power becomes as significant as actual power. The fundamental question that remains is, to what extent are these demonstrations expressions of real strength or elaborate geopolitical intimidation performances? The North Korean military system, despite its apparent robustness, faces profound structural challenges that compromise its real operational capacity, revealing a systemic fragility masked by elaborate force demonstrations. Technological obsolescence represents the Achilles heel of the military apparatus, with a large portion of the arsenal composed of equipment dating from the 1970s and 1980s, inherited from the Soviet era, and with limited modernization capacity. Communication systems, radar platforms, combat aircraft, and logistical infrastructure suffer from the inability to technological upgrade due to international sanctions and severe economic restrictions. The dependence on legacy technologies means that approximately 70% of the military arsenal has reduced operational capability, with weapon systems that, although numerically impressive, represent more of a propaganda exercise than an effective military capability. The lack of realistic training, fuel limitations for training, and precarious maintenance significantly compromise the operational readiness of the armed forces, transforming what appears to be a formidable army into a potentially vulnerable structure in real conflict scenarios. Economic limitations constitute another critical element that constrains North Korean military capabilities, creating a cycle of technological restriction and limited development. With an approximate GDP of $28 billion, smaller than many medium-sized regional economies, the regime allocates resources disproportionately to military sectors, but without the ability to sustain complex modernizations. The military budget allocation, estimated between 20 and 25% of the national budget, represents a significant investment in a context of extreme scarcity of civil development resources. This military prioritization results in a development strategy based on quantity over quality, with a large number of personnel and equipment, but significantly compromised operational and technological capacity. The dependence on allies such as China and Russia for technological and economic support adds layers of complexity, where military autonomy is constantly negotiated through intricate geopolitical relationships. The dependence on international allies and technology transfer restrictions create a military ecosystem characterized by creative adaptation and resistance, but fundamentally limited in real power projection capabilities. The regime develops asymmetric compensation strategies, prioritizing the development of asymmetric capabilities such as electronic warfare, short-range missiles, and guerrilla tactics that can potentially neutralize superior technological advantages. Military training, highly ideologized, compensates for technical limitations with a system of indoctrination that transforms soldiers into instruments of ideological resistance, where political motivation substitutes technological capability. This approach creates a unique military paradox: a numerically significant army, but technologically constrained, which depends more on resistance narratives than on real operational capabilities. The fundamental question that remains is, to what extent can this military system effectively defend itself or represent a real strategic threat in the contemporary geopolitical scenario? North Korea emerges as a unique geopolitical case, where the complexity of its military system transcends traditional analyses of military capability, transforming into a sophisticated geopolitical survival mechanism. The regime has constructed a defensive architecture that compensates for technological limitations with strategies of unpredictability, using propaganda, forced demonstrations, and ideological narratives as instruments equally relevant to real military capabilities. Its survival does not result from absolute military power, but from an ingenious ability to transform restrictions into strategic advantages, skillfully navigating complex international alliances and maintaining a permanent state of geopolitical tension that functions as a deterrence mechanism. The North Korean paradox lies precisely in the ability to transform apparent fragility into potential threat, where unpredictability becomes more important than effective military capability. The regime demonstrates that in the 21st century, power is not measured exclusively by technology or number of armaments, but by the ability to create strategic narratives that challenge conventional perceptions. Its complex defensive architecture, sustained by a combination of ideological resistance, creative technological adaptation, and strategic geopolitical alliances, represents more than a simple military system. It configures itself as a sophisticated model of national survival in a hostile international environment. The fundamental question that remains is the extent to which this resistance strategy can be sustained in an increasingly interconnected and technologically dependent world.